Hey guys, before we jump into today's episode, I want to share something with you. This June, I am hosting an in-person women's retreat called Parting the Veil, which will be hosted near Paragona, Utah. This isn't just a typical retreat, it's a space where we'll learn and actually apply a pattern of transformation that shows up everywhere. It is the pattern of descent and ascent, death and rebirth, removing what's false so that what's true can come forward. We will explore how this pattern exists in the body, in the soul, and in your lived experience. And we will give you real tools to work with. If you've been feeling the pull towards something deeper, this might just be for you. You can find all the details and reserve your spot at the link in the show notes. To Hidden Wisdom. Hidden wisdom exists to initiate truth seekers into the mysteries, gently guiding them toward a lived experience of the divine that awakens and transforms faith without dismantling family or community. This work is about faith renovation and expansion, learning how to inhabit your spiritual foundation more fully, allowing for depth, relationship, and wisdom to grow over time. I'm your host, Megan Farner. Here we explore Christ-centered esotericism, spiritual discernment, embodied wisdom, and the path of initiation, so your faith can mature, deepen, and become more alive. If you're seeking more and wanting to grow with care and integrity, you are in the right place. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Hidden Wisdom. I'm so grateful to be joined by a man who needs no introduction here, probably, Cory Jensen. He's a great friend. He's been on the podcast a number of times before. We've done the temple class together. He's also the author of what's the first one? Preparing for Your Endowment,
right?
Understanding Your Endowment, and Completing Your Endowment. Wonderful series for anyone who's wanting to understand the symbolism and sort of the deeper, more esoteric meaning behind the temple. Cory and I are great friends. We both have lately reconnected about some of the things that God has been teaching us. And Cory has particularly been studying the Sermon on the Mount and going very deep into that pattern and seeing a lot of the transformative patterns that I have been seeing in other places. And so we wanted to have this conversation today. I a little bit prepared for this a couple weeks ago when we did the podcast about Jesus and the sophiological view of Jesus. We talked about the Beatitudes briefly there, and I'm excited to talk about them more today. Cory, do you have anything that you would add by way of welcome?
No, thank you. Just happy to be back. Good to see you again.
I feel like you never really left, but it has been a minute. So I'm grateful that you're here. Well, we're excited again to go into this presentation today. I'll go ahead and just bring this to the screen, and Cory, will hand it over to you.
Okay, well, thank you. So today we want to talk a little bit about the Beatitudes. And I've found this slide and pulled it just off the internet somewhere. And I kind of liked it. It's kind of a funny picture, but I think it illustrates kind of how I have always typically approached the Beatitudes as kind of a list of virtues and corresponding blessings. And I think a lot of the Christian world kind of approaches them that way. But in more recent years, I've started to see, and especially over this last year, as I've really studied the sermon in depth, I've begun to see them as much more than a list of virtues, but really as a pattern of ascension. And so we want to talk about that today. Before we begin, though, I want to add a disclaimer. I am really painfully keenly aware of the kind of the inherent hubris of attempting to interpret our Lord's words for another person. And I don't want any part of that. I think Christ's words should speak to each of us very individually. And so I want to make it clear today that I am certainly not attempting to say this is definitively what Christ meant and this is what he meant in your life. These are just things that have been insightful to me that I want to share. Hopefully you find them valuable as well. But I'm sure you'll have additional insights, things that I've missed. I'm still very much a student trying to learn both in understanding and in living the Beatitudes. But anyway, take what's helpful here and discard anything that's not. So kind of with that disclaimer, let's go ahead and begin. You want to go to the next slide? Before we start, I want to begin before we jump in the Beatitudes with an idea that we run into a lot in the church and in the LDS faith. We have this notion of telestial, terrestrial, and celestial as kind of destinations in the afterlife, as concrete physical spaces. And, we find that in D&C 76. We find that idea in other scriptures. And that's not wrong. But I think there's more than just that. In the temple endowment, as we proceed, we begin in telestial space and then proceed to terrestrial space before ending up in celestial space. And so we proceed through these as almost levels of holiness or levels of ascension based upon our compliance with eternal laws. And so I want to have in the back of our mind as we proceed today this idea that these three divisions are levels of progression more than the idea that they're final destinations.
Mm-hmm.
So with that in mind, we can find those that three-part division all throughout scriptures. So just a couple of examples that came to mind. First of all, starting in the Garden of Eden, we're told in Genesis that there's the land of Eden, and then in the east side of the land of Eden was planted a garden, and then in the middle of the garden was the tree of life. So we have the land of Eden as a large telestial space. We have a garden, terrestrial space, and then we have a tree at the center that's a celestial space. We find the same thing with Moses and the children of Israel at Mount Sinai. You have the camp of Israel at the base of the mountain. Moses and 70 of the elders ascend partway up the mountain, and then Moses alone goes to the summit. And again, another example in the Garden of Gethsemane that's kind of beautiful. Christ takes his disciples to the garden. He leaves them there at the gate. And then he takes Peter, James, and John and goes in farther into the garden. And then he leaves Peter, James, and John and goes alone a little bit farther. And again, we see a three-part division. So be aware of that and keep that in mind as you go through scriptures. It's fascinating how many places it turns up. And as it turns out, we'll see it today in the Beatitudes as well. Mm-hmm. So let's go ahead. Okay. This is a little, I don't know who made this observation. I ran across it a few years ago, and it just made me kind of smile because I think there's a degree of truth to it. We sometimes in the gospel get so focused on being busy and running another program and doing all of these things that are all good, but sometimes we get so busy we can miss the fact that the gospel's meant to bring about really an internal transformation in our lives. Mm-hmm. Not about just additional busy work. And someone else obviously felt the same way because they quipped that we as Latter-day Saints left the sacred grove many years ago and have been trapped in an endless beehive ever since. And I know at times in my life I've been there. So it may be that we don't need to do more, but we actually need to do less, be more deliberate and in our approach. Mm-hmm. Okay. So with that kind of introduction, we're going to look today at the Beatitudes as a pattern of ascension. I know, Megan, you've talked about descension and ascension, birth, death, the resurrection, these kinds of cycles often on your program. And we see that pattern again here in the Beatitudes. Mm-hmm. So let's look at the first one. Okay. They begin with, blessed are the poor in spirit. And then the blessing is, theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Poor in spirit, to me, this is the beginning. We've made our descent at this point. This is the beginning of our ascension. And it really starts with awakening to our need. Lehi experiences this at the beginning of his dream. It's really interesting. We kind of skip over this part, but the first verse or two, he follows a man in a white robe for many hours until he finally realizes that he's lost. And then at that point, he cries out to the Lord for mercy, for help. And then the dream unfolds from there. And I think that's really symbolic. I think it's highly symbolic. We all come down into this life, and we're raised in mortality with the tradition. We're handed a bunch of traditions, and we're taught a lot of things, much of which is very good. But like Lehi following the man in the white robe, at some point we reach a point in our life where we awaken to the fact that, hey, I'm not where I need to be. I'm not where I'd like to be in my relationship with God. I maybe haven't, what I've been given, what I've been taught, what I've been handed has been inadequate in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And so we hunger for something more. There's a beautiful, Megan, you shared a book with me called The Wisdom Jesus by Cynthia Borjalt, I believe. I don't know how you say her last name.
I don't know how to, Bogalt, maybe that's how I would pronounce it.
Anyway, some lady, Cynthia wrote Wisdom Jesus. And it's a wonderful little book. And in it, she shares a story that I really like. It's a story of a Zen master and a young student. And the student comes to this master, and he wants to become a pupil. He wants to learn from him. And he's very eager in this first encounter to make a good impression. And so he starts talking. He sits down with this Zen master, and he begins to recount his experiences, the teachers he's had, all the things he's learned. He starts delving into his philosophies and how he sees the world. And he goes on and on and on and on with the monologue. And at one point, the master is there quietly listening. And he begins to pour a cup of tea. And he doesn't say anything. He just pours and pours and continues to pour while he's listening to this monologue. And eventually the teacup fills up and it begins to spill over and run everywhere. And the master just continues to pour. Well, eventually the young man notices the situation and stops his little diatribe and says, whoa, stop. You're spilling all over the place. Can't you see the cup's already full? And the master said, yes, and so are you. How can I possibly teach you anything? And so to me, this first step, blessed are the poor in spirit, it's about recognizing that our cups in many ways are filled with good things, but also wrong things in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And we need to, before Christ can really fill us, we've got to empty some things out of our lives. We need to empty our cups so that we're prepared to receive. Mm-hmm. The blessing that goes along with this is that the kingdom of heaven is ours. And, Christ tells us in the New Testament, I think that's an external thing, but it's also internal. The kingdom of heaven is within us. And either one, the kingdom of heaven within us cannot begin to open until we begin this process of emptying ourselves and recognizing our inadequacy and our need to be filled. Mm-hmm. So to me, that's what this is about.
Yeah, it really it invokes the imagery for me of what it is to have a broken heart and a contrite spirit. Because usually we hear that and we think, oh, I just need to be down in the dumps. So, I've got to be humbled. I've got to be at rock bottom. And sometimes that is what it takes. It's kind of an individual thing. Sometimes that is what it takes before we're willing to empty our cups. But it doesn't have to be that. It can just be another way of saying a broken heart and a contrite spirit is to have an open heart and an open mind, and to cultivate that willingness of, okay, I'm sure that I'm holding things right now in my cup that are not accurate, right? Because I'm not having the transformation, I'm not having the connection to God that I would expect. And so this, to me, goes along with that idea of cultivating a broken heart and a contrite spirit. That is also becoming poor in spirit, recognizing I have need of God. I have need of transformation.
That's exactly it. And it's interesting because it doesn't matter if we have perceived ourselves to be relatively righteous or if we've been relatively quote unquote wicked. I mean, it's the same starting point for Alma the Younger. He's harrowed up for 3 days and 3 nights with, oh my gosh, look at what I've done in my life. And with but it's the same exact, he recognizes his need and cries out to God.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is, regardless of how we live, this is the first step.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, and this leads us naturally to a state of mourning, and it may be partially mourning for our inadequacy and our failure, but I think more than that, more importantly, it's recognizing and mourning our separation from God.
Mm-hmm.
And from the divinity that's within each of us as well. And the interesting thing here is the promise is that all they who mourn will be comforted. Well, how are we comforted? We're comforted by the first and second comforter, by beginning to reestablish that connection with God that's been missing, that fills that void that we recognize is there. And it's interesting in that light to look at Moses chapter 6, verse 61. This is the description of the Holy Ghost that we find in Moses 6:61. And it's really interesting to me because this is what it says. Therefore, it is given to abide in you the record of heaven, the comforter, the peaceable things of immortal glory, the truth of all things, that which quickeneth all things, that which maketh alive all things, that which knoweth all things and hath all power, according to wisdom, mercy, truth, justice, and judgment. That's what we begin to reconnect to here. We recognize that's missing, and we begin to make that reconnection. I think this is a lot more than we typically think of in our LDS tradition. And I think this is connecting us back to the part of it. It's also partly connecting to the part of our nature that's eternal, that's our soul, that's maybe asleep in this mortality. So there's more than just, there's a deeper connection to God here, and there's a deeper connection to our divine soul as well. Let's just say that.
That's great. If people want to know more, then you can read Completing Your Endowment. It is available in the Hidden Wisdom app in our library for free. So I'll just kind of put that plug, but that was
it's a great one. It's well worth, that's a topic well worth digging into.
Yeah. Maybe suffice it to say that the Holy Ghost might be one of those topics where we think our cup is full, and if we empty it, we might receive something new.
There's a lot more there we could learn for sure.
Yes.
Okay, let's move on to the next one. So, and again, this is all part of this first stage of emptying ourselves. So blessed are the meek here. And the promise is the meek will inherit the earth. Well, meekness is not easy. That requires, again, it's emptying our cups, but it's emptying the fear, the pride, the control, all of that stuff that we, in our natural man state, cling to. And meekness requires that we surrender to God. And it's interesting because the promise here is that we inherit the earth. I look back through history and you look at how many men, quote unquote, great men, have tried to conquer the world, tried to conquer the earth. and have failed. And to me, it's illustrative of the fact that the battle that we fight is really internal, much more than being external. And once we have the internal battle, once that's aligned and in place, then the external falls into place naturally. The meek naturally inherit the earth. The external naturally follows the correct ordering of the internal. Is how I see this. And so meekness puts us in a state. These first three, recognizing our, being poor in spirit, mourning, and becoming meek. This is emptying out the false and the error and opening ourselves to being filled by God.
And
it leads us very naturally into the next step.
so would you say that these three are kind of the telestial leg of the
Yes,
transformative journey? Yeah.
they are. And we're going to actually specifically look at that, but you're exactly right.
Okay.
These three are the telestial. These are kind of preparing us to ascend now.
Yeah.
Now we
Correct,
should
Cory.
be, we're emptied and we're prepared. So next we are, go ahead. Hungry and thirsty. We're not happy anymore with the fast food diet we've had. So we want something deeper, some steak and potatoes or whatever it is that you like. I don't know. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. So this is what we begin to crave in our life is, we're eliminating this negative and we're replacing it. We're filling it. It's not just a void. It's creating a void, but we're filling that with righteousness. Well, what is the righteousness? In Ether, we read that faith, hope, and charity leads to Christ, who's the fountain of all righteousness. And that's really what, to me, this is about. We're beginning to take upon ourselves more of the nature of Christ. We're beginning to connect with him. We're developing faith, hope, and charity in our lives. We're beginning to see, take on his attributes. Anyway, that's what I believe this step is about. Anything you would like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think that it's about craving that connection. And I think about Christ, not only Jesus, but also Christ as a synonym for word, truth, spirit, love, like the spirit that is in and through all things, right? And so we've emptied ourselves of our natural man, and now we're receiving divinity. Like we're bringing that true divine nature into our embodied experience. And I think that that's a significant symbol of, I like that you have the bread and the water here, because those sacramental emblems to me are symbolic of embodiment, that we're taking these things, we are consuming them. There's the principle of you are what you eat, right? So like as we are bringing that into our body, like we are becoming more of that. Yeah, I think that's beautiful.
Yeah. And you can see, as you see, it's a very natural progression. These things flow from one to the next, very orderly. Okay, let's move on. All right, so next is blessed are the merciful, and they receive mercy. And in a way, this is a little bit of I think, a self-reinforcing loop, because if we arrive at this point, we've begun to receive and recognize the mercy of the Lord in our lives. In fact, the interaction of the greater our interaction with God, how do I want to say this? Partly the transformation that comes about in our lives is through increasing interaction with the Lord, with the divine. And so as we receive his mercy into our lives, then we naturally want to extend that outwards to others. It's like, it's a little bit like in Les Mis, the beautiful scene there where Jean Valjean is given mercy by the priest, and that act changes his whole life. And it's a beautiful symbol kind of us and the Lord too. We all receive that, and then we're meant to reflect that. Those who are merciful, they accept the injustices of life and lay them aside, and they begin to replace justice, or the natural man's desire for justice, with love and mercy. And so I like this image of, giving a merciful heart to others, because we've received vertically from the Lord, and now we're extending out horizontally to others. And then the blessing is that we receive more mercy. So it's self-reinforcing, right? It's kind of the law of karma here. Mercy comes back to us again, as well. And so it becomes this kind of self-reinforcing upward spiral.
Mm-hmm. I really like that you brought in the law of karma. The other phrase that I use for that is the law of the harvest, right? That Christ taught, you reap what you sow. I wonder if we could also extend that symbolically outward from this level of the progression, that this is the point in time where you're starting to learn how to live in alignment with all the eternal laws, right? So maybe in addition to the law of karma, we would put the law of oneness or the law of polarity and gender that we talk about a lot on this channel, right? That we're starting to learn masculine and feminine, how to balance all these things. And so we receive them by experiencing God, as you said. And then we are also attuning ourselves and our spirit and our body to live those eternal laws ourselves.
I would agree with that completely, and and recognize too also that here we are. This is in a terrestrial realm. We've taken a step above the telestial. We've left behind some of the negative tendencies of the past, and we are filling ourselves with new life. And so I do agree with that. We're also in this process purifying our hearts, which leads us to our next beatitude. Blessed are the pure in heart. Now I think we're entering the celestial portion. So we've done the work of filling our lives with God, and and awakening our divine nature and developing that and nurturing those attributes. And eventually we reach the point where our hearts become purified. And at that point, we see God, we're brought back into his presence. And the scriptures testify we will see him as he is because we're like him. So we see him in ourselves. We see him. We also see him reflected back in ourselves, in who we are becoming. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I love this one. I think one of the things that I saw too when it comes to the pure in heart, another way to phrase that is to be unified in heart, to be of one heart, right? And one mind, which harkens back to Zion. But I think when we're looking at this from the individual level, to me, it does speak of that unification between the different aspects of myself, right? So I have, as I mentioned before, a balanced masculine and a balanced feminine that are working together, that are collaborating together in myself. I am connected body and spirit. Like there's a sense of integrity that I feel like is connected with this idea of being pure in heart.
Yes, for sure. For sure. This is being, like you say, unified within ourselves. And it leads us naturally as well to the next one, which is blessed are the peacemakers. And I really didn't like this image.
That's quite a picture you got there.
It's kind of goofy. It's the only one I could find. So
these are the Nephilim, right?
Yes. These are peacemakers in their armor, right?
Okay. Yes.
No
Peace through force. That's a joke.
As you're talking, as you're saying, we become unified within ourselves, and we return to God's presence, and in that, what naturally flows from that is we want to become peacemakers. We want to foster unity with others. We recognize others' divine nature. We recognize God's image in them, and we're remade in God's image, and we're seeking to foster peace and eliminate contention where we can. It's interesting to me that when Christ appears to the Nephites, almost immediately, the very first instruction he gives them is to get rid of contention. That's the spirit of the devil, and that's the quickest way to descend is a spirit of contention. And
Mhm.
so we're eliminating that. It's also interesting that the blessing along with this is the peacemakers are called the children of God. And we encounter this idea in the scriptures of becoming his sons and daughters. And part of receiving God, part of entering into his presence is to um, become a son or a daughter. And part of that is, as you said, we're remade in his image. We begin to reflect his image in our own lives. So we're now in union with God. This is again celestial space.
Mhm. This one, I feel like I want to emphasize, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this because it's kind of become one of those more commonly heard phrases lately in just LDS culture and talk, as we've heard a lot of messages about being a peacemaker.
Hmm.
And to me, I don't feel like we can isolate what that really is from this whole journey of ascension. Like remembering that all of these things are preparatory and building on each other. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Like, do you feel like it's possible to be a peacemaker? Can we just jump to that level? Or do we really have to go through this whole process?
No, so I think you do go through the whole process, and I don't know if it's always exactly as linear as this is laid out here. I
Mhm.
think we sometimes jump around, and maybe on one area we're at a celestial level, and another area we're still struggling. Um, and I think sometimes we have the wrong idea about peacemakers too. I think we have this idea that a peacemaker is just a pushover, whatever, I mean, we
Yeah.
can have a negative connotation with this that I don't think is correct. There's a
Mhm.
really wonderful book I read years ago by the Arbringer Institute. It's called The Anatomy of Peace. And what I loved about that book is it talked about how it talked about having a heart at war versus having a heart at peace.
Mhm.
It really got down to examining our motives. I might have, and where our heart lies. So, for example, I might have in my family, I might have a teenager that's in need of some correction for whatever reason. I can do that. I can be angry and I can approach that child or that teenager with a heart at war, and that's going to show through in how I act, and it's going to call forth a reciprocal spirit in that child.
Mhm.
Or I can approach them with a heart at peace and and from a sincere desire, from a sincere love and desire to be helpful. And if I approach it that way, the discipline that might happen or the correction that might occur or whatever my action might be exactly the same.
Mm.
It could be exactly the same in both cases, but the outcome is going to be different because of where my heart is. And how
Mm.
it's going to be received on the other side is going to be different because of where my heart is. And ultimately, that's all I can control. And so I think being a peacemaker, Moroni Moroni at the end of the Book of Mormon gives an address by his father Mormon, and he addresses it to those who have received a hope in Christ. And he says, I judge these things because of your peaceable walk with the children of men. I think once we've ascended to this level, we've been in the Lord's presence. We recognize the inherent value in every soul, and that changes our hearts to where we don't have hearts at war any longer.
Mm. Mhm.
I'll share a little story with you. I had, because this is kind of close to home, but it was one of those pivotal changing moments in my life. I had, I have a child who had some struggles as a teenager and really went. in a path that was not healthy or good. And it was a path that, I had seen others on that path, and I had judged them harshly. I would say, so and so is, I mean, they were kind of a worthless human being in my mind because of the decisions that they had made. It's easy to look at homeless people or drug addicts or other marginalized people in society and harshly judge them and dismiss them. I was Anyway, I was given a glimpse one day of how the Lord sees each of us. And it was just a brief glimpse, but even those who we would consider worthless people, the lowest of the low, the least of the least, those people whom we really disregard. And the experience I had showed me how precious every single life is to God, even those lives. There isn't I mean, the scriptures say, "Great is the worth of souls." It's easy to read those words. It's another thing to get a glimpse of that from the Lord's view, and it's another thing to begin to internalize that ourselves. So I think that's becoming a peacemaker, is coming to that knowledge of who God really is and who we really are and who one another is. And we treat each other accordingly, even though people around us may not be acting in their true natures. We treat them according to their true nature because we understand it.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I love that imagery of a heart at war versus a heart at peace. I think that harkens back to the idea of being pure in heart, right? Is before I can even approach my brother, I have to be whole in myself. I have to be healed. I have to be introspective of what are the moments when my heart is at war and why, and how do I bring myself peace regardless of the external circumstances that might be triggering that. I know that that's something that the Lord teaches later in the Sermon on the Mount as well.
Okay, the last two are interesting because the last two are both blessed are the persecuted. And it's interesting that Christ ends here, but it also makes sense because you think about those who have made this journey, and often and generally they end up in the Lord's presence, and then they're often sent back to witness with a mission. I mean, you think of Lehi, you think of Isaiah, you think of all these prophets who have made this journey. They've been brought into the Lord's presence. They're sent back to testify of others. Well, others are still back on the they haven't even awoken yet. And so when you come back on this kind of mission, you're now different. You are and as you testify like Christ did, there are going to be those who respond to the message and awaken. You will help others begin to make this journey. But there are going to be others who are on an opposite path. They're going to be very angry and upset because you're disrupting their carnal sense of security. They're false. And you see over and over in the scriptures, they're angry enough that they persecute even to the point of killing. This is a photo or a painting of the martyrdom of Stephen. And I love that story because even in this act where these people are stoning Stephen, the scripture records that he is filled with the love of God. And being filled with that love, he pleads for and forgives these people who are killing him, in the process of killing him. And that's the depth of God's love. That he's loving even those people who are inactive, because he understands, again, who they truly are and why they're acting the way they're acting. Now, in the Beatitudes, there's two persecuted. Blessed are the persecuted and blessed are the persecuted. And I wondered about that for a long time. And this is my opinion, why that's repeated. I think it's because we experience internal and external persecution. And what I mean by that is we experience persecution from within our own faith group. Remember, there were traditions we had that we had to empty out to make this journey. Now we can see those clearly. And as we testify, hey, there's some things here in our faith that aren't quite right. There's some things that we need to look at. That's not received very well sometimes.
Mm.
And so you have internal persecution. And then, of course, the external is, those you're trying to awaken in the first place. So, but the next verses in the sermon, Christ says you are called to be the salt and the light of, salt of the earth and the light of the world. And here again, you have the idea of a horizontal. Salt is a preservative. It's a covenant. You have ascended vertically. You've connected vertically with God. You are a being of light, of greater light and truth. You're ascended, but you remain in this fallen world, and you are there to bless others, not go hide in a monastery somewhere. But your life is to bring the vertical light into and reflect it in this horizontal realm. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Okay. So this is a little image of Solomon's temple. And again, we kind of touched on this earlier, but we can overlay this whole Ascension model on the temple as well. You have the outer court, the telestial realm. You have the holy place, which was a terrestrial realm. And then you had the Holy of Holies, which was a celestial realm. And if you flip to the next slide, we can see, this first three Beatitudes are then the telestial, or in a purification or emptying kind of realm. The next two are I lump them in kind of a terrestrial or illumination. We're beginning to be filled, be purified. This is also purification, I guess. And then finally, we have the celestial realm, or union with God or with the divine, where we find the pure in heart who enter God's presence, the peacemakers, and the persecuted who share in his efforts to redeem the souls of man, and the rejection that comes along with that.
I just love this. Really quick, I just wanted to add to that you and I haven't talked about this in this degree of depth, but I feel like it's just another witness to me. We both have been learning these patterns. The language that I use in the app to denote different phases of development is awakening, which would be that telestial purification. The terrestrial illumination I call transformation, right? So like you're going through, you're releasing what's not true to receive what is true. And then embodiment, which is bringing all of that which is spiritual into physical reality, having connection between body, heart, mind, spirit, between me and God, between me and my spouse, like all of these points of union. So I love that.
That's great. I like your labels even better.
I think they're all great. No competition.
I might update my spreadsheet or my little
it's good.
PowerPoint. That's great. I love those. I love those, and I agree with them 100%. So, okay. Last thing I want to touch on, it's really interesting. This is kind of hard to read or see. I'm sorry. But it's interesting because we proceed through the Sermon on the Mount and we arrive at the veil of the temple, and it's there at the veil that we receive the command to ask, seek, and knock. And we get an amazing promise along with that everyone who asks, seeks, and knocks, it will be opened. So this path, this is one of the things, the sermon ends at the conclusion of the sermon. Matthew records in chapter 7. And by the way, the Sermon on the Mount is in Matthew 5, 6, and 7. Those chapter breaks are not coincidental. They correlate with the these three levels of ascension as well: telestial, terrestrial, and celestial. The sermon ends, and Matthew records in the last verse of Matthew chapter 7, Jesus ended these sayings, the people were astonished. And what's astonishing is Christ is saying, look, essentially, he's saying this path that I've been outlining is open to everyone. You can make it. You can take it. You can do it. You don't have to be the high priest. You don't have to be the prophet. You don't have to be some selected leader. I mean, we say God is no respecter of persons, and then we turn around in our beliefs and we say, well, yeah, except that my stake president and my bishop and everybody else is a lot higher, they're a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
The Lord has a lot more respect for them.
Mm-hmm.
It's and Christ is saying here very plainly, no, this path is open to everyone. Now, what's interesting is Jacob also gives a wonderful temple sermon in 2 Nephi 9, and he gets to the exact same point right before the veil. But instead of blessings, which the other thing I love about Christ is this is ascension. It's all positive. It's all optimistic, right? Jacob gets really kind of pessimistic. He starts spouting off woes.
If
Whoa,
you
whoa,
don't
whoa,
make
whoa,
it,
whoa.
if you don't, yeah.
And what's interesting, I think part of the woe is these people that he talks about won't engage in this process. They won't ask, seek, and knock. And so the result is going to be woe in their life. At some point, they're going to have some regrets because they've missed an opportunity. But it's really interesting if you line up, and I'm indebted to Dave Butler in his book, The Language of Adam, because he first pointed out this connection. And he mentions it kind of in passing, but I went in and I dug in and I lined these up side by side. And it's really interesting to me, kind of the parallels between them. So the first beatitude is the poor in spirit. Jacob's first woe is not poor, but it's the rich, whose treasure is their God. Okay. There's a couple of things about that are interesting. Number one is, if I'm rich and my treasure's my God, I have my confidence placed in an idol. And I'm not going to recognize that I'm poor in spirit because I'm just blind to it.
Right.
If you're rich, you're awakened.
Right. Well, and rich in the treasure being what I think I know also, right? Like it's not just tangible things. It could also be, I think I already have all the truth.
Yeah. The other thing that's interesting about the contrast in rich and poor is he talks about the rich despise the poor. So whether it's our wealth, whether it's knowledge, whether it's my religion is better than your religion, it's the attitude of I'm better than you. It's pride, right? And it's that contrast that prevents me from recognizing my own poverty, and it also prevents me from reaching out to others in mercy. But it's just the juxtaposition there is beautiful to me. And then we have those who mourn and those who are deaf, who will not hear. Well, the deaf won't hear God. They won't hear his warnings. They won't hear the messengers that God sends. They won't hear others who have made this path and are testifying. They also, in an earthly sense, they don't hear the cries of those who mourn, who are suffering, who are in need of, who Christ came to minister to and who he asks us to minister to.
Yeah, I think also esoterically, I think the idea of those who mourn versus being deaf and not hearing, somehow just seeing those line up, I almost feel like it's also deaf to your own emotion. Like I'm actually not tuning in to the ways that I feel poor, to the ways that I feel like to the ways that I feel grief, right? Like I'm not listening to the inner cues that would help me take this journey.
Yeah, that's a beautiful insight. I haven't thought of it that way, but I think I like that insight a lot. The next one is, we talked about the meek. and emptying our, and juxtaposed against that, we have the blind, the proud, who will not see. Okay, and then we have hunger and thirsting for righteousness versus uncircumcised of heart. That's an interesting, and I think I misspelled it. That's an interesting way to phrase this, because someone who's uncircumcised of heart, their heart is proud and unrestrained. They're not in, circumcision was a symbol of the covenant with the Lord. So they're not in covenant. They're not hungering and thirsting. They're not bridling their desires, appetites, and passions, despite whatever knowledge they have. They're self-sufficient. They're not hungering and thirsting for righteousness.
Maybe hungering and thirsting after the telestial things, right? Like our appetites, as you said, also our distractions, like the things that we're so used to consuming that don't actually fill you.
Yeah, hungering and thirsting after the wrong things. So, but it's, again, an interesting juxtaposition. Now, this one was a little weird when I had to think about this one for a while. Merciful, and on the other hand, you have the liar. Woe unto the liars. And at first, I didn't see how those were opposites until it occurred to me that mercy seeks to heal relationships and lift burdens and bring peace. Lies, on the other hand, sow division. They create mistrust in relationships, and they damage relationships. So they're opposite effects. So they are, in a sense, opposites. It just wasn't obvious to me on the surface.
Yeah, as I'm looking at that, the thought that came to me, perhaps a connection between exercising mercy, right, and forgiveness, and the particular lie that it made me think of was bearing false witness, right? So that's the opposite of being merciful, right? Is to hold something against someone in ways that are actually not aligned with what is true. And in that way, I also see an inner dynamic of being merciful with ourselves versus
the lies that we tell ourselves.
the lies that we tell ourselves, and bearing false witness against ourselves and claiming like, oh, I'm so bad, I'm so fallen. Like, I feel like there's a shame element there.
I'll never measure up. I'll never be good. I'll never, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not. Yeah, all of those lies for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that's a beautiful insight as well. All of these do apply internally and externally.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the next one, the pure in heart, and we talked about becoming that. And then Jacob contrasts it with murderers, which is, again, okay, I had to think about this for a minute. But if my heart is pure, I'm in alignment with God, and I'm in alignment with my fellow man, and internally. A murderer, anger, murder, cruelty, all of that comes from a corrupted heart. So I'm corrupted internally. I don't value. I mean, it is these are opposite ends of the spectrum. This is the heart at war taken to an extreme.
Right. Well, and I think we talked about the pure in heart being that inner integrity, right? That is aligned to eternal law. And that means that it's creative in nature, right? Like there's a balance there. All of the parts are functioning as they should, and in alignment with eternal truth. So creation is taking place. Whereas if everything is out of balance, you're going to be in a state of decreation. And I feel like murder is that ultimate symbol that we have of being decreated, right? So
Right.
that's interesting.
And causing destruction, for sure. Okay, the next one, again, peacemakers versus those who commit whoredoms. And again, I had to think about this one for a minute, but it's interesting. I love this one because it reflects, it gives us a little insight into the positive side as well. The peacemaking that we do, whoredoms, right? Okay, why would a whoredom be an opposite of a peacemaker? Well, whoredoms and adultery, they destroy families and they cause strife in the home, which is, the basic unit of society. So they weaken societies and nations as a whole, which, interestingly, that gives us insight into where a large part of our peacemaking efforts are going to be centered is in our families and in our closest
Mhm.
relationships. And that makes sense, because that's where the friction, and that's where we bump and jostle and offend each other at times. And I think internally this applies as well. The scriptures say that those who commit adultery, destroy their own souls. I think this creates such disunity in yourself. I mean, it just fragments you. You can't have
Mm,
purity in heart. You can't have a heart at peace when you have this stuff in your life.
mhm. Yeah, when I think about whoredoms, I think about selling that which is sacred.
Hmm.
And that connects to the idea of murder to get gain, which is all about secret combinations, right? Which is the opposite of peacemaking. Like I feel like those actually really appropriately contrast each other.
Hmm. Yeah, and then the last two, the persecuted. Jacob has woe to those who worship idols and woe to those who die in their sins. And here again, these are the ones that are doing the persecuting. I mean,
Mhm.
in essence. And so again, it's and the reason that they're persecuting you is whatever they are worshiping, whatever they have placed in their life is an idol. And they are not repenting of their sins. They're dying spiritually in their sins.
Mhm.
So again, I don't know. To me, this was a beautiful juxtaposition of, and it's a ladder of ascent, and it's also showing us I think, a ladder of descent as well.
Yes.
I think there's a progression here is on the other side as well, or a degression, I guess.
Mhm. And I think that the difference between which way are you moving has a lot to do with intention, right? And also recognizing these patterns and being willing to submit, being willing to surrender to that death process that really does come at the beginning. It's interesting because looking at these side by side, the progressive pattern begins with a death. It's
Hmm.
a death of my ego, it's a death of my control and what I think I know. The decreative pattern is you're rich and
Hmm.
like there's
You're
a focus on,
self-sufficient. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so it's backwards, like it's applying, you're trying to be born without dying first, and that just doesn't work. So,
And one of the things I love about the Book of Mormon is it illustrates beautifully over and over and over again that you can be on this negative side and you can be very religious. I mean, this is the great and spacious building,
mhm,
yet, and yet it has the appearance of being good and doing the right things and whatever. So, anyway, I think it's helpful to see and I'm grateful to Jacob for providing us with kind of the contrast.
mhm, mhm. And I do think too, as you mentioned earlier, sometimes the way that these manifest on the outside might look the same, like
Hmm.
the activities, the behaviors that are taking place. And so this truly is an inward journey of what is my intention? What is my motivation? What is the state of my soul as I am engaging in this? That's really, I think, where the difference is made.
Yeah, yeah. It's the transformation that Christ is trying to bring about, inviting us to. And so we're left with the decision. We're left at the veil of the temple, so to speak, in Solomon's temple, and this is reflected in our own endowment. Christ gives a command or an invitation to engage in this process: ask, seek, and knock. And the promise is, hey, it'll open, it'll unfold, it will open. Engage in it, and it's open to everyone. It doesn't matter who you are. Engage in the process, and it'll unfold. The kingdom of heaven is within you. It will open up within you. And our temple is inviting us to do the same thing, but we have to conscientiously make the choice to proceed. And I think asking, seeking, and knocking are keys in this. I don't think we do this alone.
Mm.
I think asking enables the Lord to guide us in the process, to to bring about in our lives the things that we need. And seeking is engaging in this process. And so I guess I would conclude with, I think each of us need to pause and ask, have we asked, are we seeking, and are we knocking? And if not, why not? And if not, maybe it's because we haven't seen the invitation in this light. But I think this is exactly the journey that Christ is inviting us to take.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would add too that we have to keep asking, keep seeking, and keep knocking. Because at any point in that journey, we can also go back to that place of feeling like our cup is full
For
and
sure.
feeling like, oh, I've gained it. Like I've progressed a little bit and now I know the answer. And the truth is that as we are conscientiously connecting with Christ and working through this pattern of transformation, it's never ending. Like there is always more for us to be unlearning and reclaiming and healing. Like and if we stop doing it for ourselves, we can start doing it for our ancestors and our children. And like this work truly blesses and binds everyone. So there's always more that we can be asking and seeking and knocking for.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. Well said. Well, thank you, Megan. I appreciate you having me on. That's kind of what I wanted to share today, but I hope those thoughts are helpful for your audience, and they have blessed my life. And like I said, I'm still trying to live and implement them and understand them better. But I appreciate this opportunity to share a few thoughts with you.
Always. Well, thank you so much. And again, I so appreciate it. To me, it's always a confirmation when me and you and other mentors and friends, like we kind of go into our study holes for a while. Like we didn't talk as much last year because I think you were learning this and I was being taught certain things. And then we come back together and realize like, oh, this is actually the same thing that we're being taught. We're just being taught from these different angles. And so to me, that's a really beautiful just exposure of God to see that like the divine is truly able to do their own work. They can teach all of us individually. And even if it doesn't look like there's a structure or an order or an organization, when we come together, we expose to each other like, oh, we are all learning truth. Like we're learning it and we're learning it in our own language, according to our own tongue and understanding. And so I think that's beautiful. This pattern has been what has been on my heart this year. That's why we've done so many, like we've been doing these different episodes, looking at it from these different perspectives. This is what the Parting the Veil retreat is all about, is recognizing this pattern in different places and then learning how to apply it by going through those deaths and rebirths. And so I really appreciate your study and just who you are, because you have lived this pattern. You continue to live this pattern. And I just admire you for that. So thank you so much for teaching.
Thank you. I appreciate your insights too. It's helpful to see things from different angles to me. So anyway, I appreciate the opportunity.
If this hidden wisdom resonates, it's because this path is meant for you. The Hidden Wisdom app is our primary gathering space for truth seekers who want their faith to awaken, transform, and expand within a steady and grounded container. Inside the app, you'll find pathway programs, libraries, community support, and daily invitations designed to help spiritual transformation unfold gradually, layer by layer, so that your faith remains rooted even as it grows. You'll find the app linked in the show notes. This is where your journey continues.